Slightly different time to we're often used to, 4 o'clock. Starting with the evacuation procedure, we do have some people who I'm not used to seeing. So I will read the evacuation procedure. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, you'll gather outside the Yorkshire Bank on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered, that one there, or by the fire exits which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make sure you make yourself known to a member of our staff. Please also make sure your mobile phones are turned off or turned to silent. And I would advise you that all of this meeting will be recorded and may be used for future broadcasts. Apologies for absence, we have Ian Lloyd. Declarations of interest, I would refer members to the addendum that has been circulated, which shows the declarations of Councillor Beaumont, who joined us at our last meeting. Are there any further declarations other than those printed on that?
No, Chair.
No, okay. Item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. Are we happy they are a correct record?
Yes, Chair.
They were marked to follow. They were sent out yesterday or the day before.
That's part of it.
Okay, all happy with those?
Yeah.
Public consultation. I have people wishing to speak on items 7, 8 and 9. On item 7, Councillor Condicor, Councillor Golby and Michelle Condicor. On item 8, Councillor Condicor and Michelle Condaka. And item 9, Councillor Condaka. There are no other public speakers notified. I'm going to take it in the order of the agenda because there's only item 6 on which we don't have a speaker. So item 6, the National Joint Council NJC 2019 Pay Award Implementation. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. So, as part of the National Joint Pay Agreement 1819, including the introduction of new PACE band which was effective the 1st of April 2019, which means changes have to be made to the Council's current pay structure in order to achieve the implementation. Appendix A details the new NJC PACE band. Implementing all of the new PACE bands would increase the number of incremental points in many of the grades. However, not all of the salary scale points to be used, so the proposal is to move some of them at the bottom of the grades where possible. This keeps the number of incremental points in the grade the same as it is now. And appendix details the proposed new pay structure. An equality impact assessment has been carried out with the conclusion that the proposed pay structure minimises any equality issues and no employee will be treated unfairly by the matched new pay points. The budgetary implications have been included in the draft housing revenue account and the general fund 1920 budget report to council. Consultation with staff and trade unions both locally and nationally has been undertaken with informal feedback or comments raised, and the recommendation is the proposed new pay structure as detailed in Appendix B of the report be agreed and submitted to full council for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any comments?
No comments other than the fact that although it's a cost to the council, I am pleased that staff are getting a pay rise of some significance this year. Well, significance is a word that has many connotations.
Can I just ask Councillor Shepherd, we are still paying at least the national living wage to all of our employees.
We are.
I think that's very important to note. Are we all happy to accept the recommendation?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, that is then agreed. We then move on to the Housing Revenue Account, Budget and Capital Programme. Councillor Beaumont.
Thank you, Chair. The Housing Revenue Account Budget and Capital Programme, Section 3 sets out the forecast outturn for the HRA for this financial year, with the variance largely attributable to increased investment income and savings in repair and maintenance. Section 4 deals with the draft HRA budget position for 2019-20, It identifies a deficit of 5.86 million, which has risen due to a significantly increased capital programme of 23.64 million, requiring a revenue contribution of 9.77 million. Paragraph 4.3 deals with the recent government announcements relating to the abolition of the proposed high-value voids levy and the removal of the HRA borrowing cap. While these announcements do provide additional flexibility, costs of additional borrowing must be affordable over the 30-year business plan. Paragraphs 4.6 to 4.7 detail the assumptions included within the budget, whilst paragraph 4.8 identifies a significant recent issue relating to the occurrence of 53 Mondays within the financial year due to the universal credit legislation, which does not allow for 53 Mondays within a single financial year and could potentially lead to an increased risk of rent arrears or financial hardship for tenants. The business plan has not made any adjustments for this, pending further discussions between the Department of Work and Pensions and the LGA. Proposed increases to fees and charges are detailed at paragraphs 4.9 to 4.10. Paragraph 4.12 identifies the increase to the risk to the HRA from the rollout of universal credit. Over a quarter of total rent arrears has been occurred by the 400 or approximately 7% of customers. This is a significant proportion of rent arrears attributable to a very small proportion of tenants. Section 5 deals with the capital programme. Whilst there has been a small amount of slippage within the current financial year, this is largely due to tendering issues, the suspension of the fire door programme to allow for additional testing following Grenfell, and the decision to pilot and market test the conversion of the difficult-to-let bed sits rather than embark on an immediate full-scale rollout. The large-scale improvement feasibility study will be utilised within the 2019-20 to support larger development and regeneration opportunities as they arise. Paragraph 5.3 identifies an allocated budget of 8.6 million for new build properties and acquisitions, and paragraph 5.4 details an increased capital investment of 15 million is affordable over the life of the business plan. The risk assessment for the business plan is contained within section 6. Section 7 considers the up-to-date assumptions made in relation to the 30-year business plan. Of particular note at 7.2 is the forecast for an additional 900 new units are now affordable over the 30-year period. However, land availability remains a concern, and acquisitions will be key to increasing the ability to meet that target as referenced at paragraph 7.3. In addition, 7.5 highlights that we expect to lose over 1,200 units via the right to buy, meaning that we'll be in a position of net loss of housing stock. The continued priority to increase the numbers of new affordable housing must be balanced with the need to continue to invest in our existing stock, and the HRA business plan takes account of this requirement. The recommendations are at section 2 of the report. It should be noted that the recommendation 2.7 is in relation to the HRA and not the general fund itself. That's all I've got to say, Chair.
Thank you. We have public speakers. Councillor Condell, please.
Thank you very much. Generally, the housing part of the council budget is one of the least politically controversial, and I think housing is one thing we do try and manage quite well, and the officers are actually doing the best they can with the continuous changing legislation and rent agreements that have to go up and then down, etc. One thing that is always an issue is the capital programme, because we obviously all want for our particular areas the capital works to go as quickly as possible and as soon as possible. This year I had a scooter place put in Cleaver Gardens, and it just sat unused for 6 months with the finishing off. So I think if we are doing these capital things, we need to get them finished and in use as quickly as possible, so that actually the plans for all this capital work actually have an end date, and when the end date happens, you've actually got all the things arranged, like the policy for scooter parking, etc., so that they come into use. We've also got the conversion of the warden flats, and we've got some in my ward where you're converting the ex-warden flats into accommodation, and all these things all take a lot of time, but the quicker they happen, the more we get the benefit from the capital programme. And this capital slippage is always worrying, because we start paying money out for all this building work we've done, and yet there's things like the shelters or the warden's flats sitting there that haven't been brought into use. So I do ask we actually try and monitor the capital slippage and get the limited money we have got to spend, actually the benefits from that spending in as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any points of clarification?
No.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Golby.
Thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of Richard as well, because he can't get here for this time, but we are actually supportive of the HRA budget that's been presented, pretty much because it's the one that we actually submitted as well, it would seem, but we were told via email that we couldn't present a separate HRA budget. So effectively, as this is the budget that we actually put together ourselves also for the Conservative groups, I mean, business people that I've spoken to about this say that it's coincidences of this magnitude don't really take place that often, but it must be Christmas or something, because it has. We would be quite happy to support this. So, yeah.
Thank
Any
you,
questions?
Councillor Golby. Any points of clarification? Thank you, Councillor Golby. Michelle Conley. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. Just a few points that I probably want clarification on, really, rather than anything else. It's increasing the homeless hostel rents quite a bit. I presume that's one part of the council actually paying another, and then part of it coming back from the government, so we're not actually any worse off by doing that. Someone can just clarify that. I noticed on the variance from this year and things, there was reduced income from garages of 43,000, and yet further along there was a bit about increasing the rent from garages, and I'm just very conscious of, for example, with the car park situation, when you put the rates up, less people use them, and as there's already a sort of deficit from the income from garages from what you expected, would it not be that if you put the rents up, less people will use them and the difference will be even greater? Also, the variances, other minor variations, with no specifications, but £70,000. I know it's a budget of millions, but it didn't sound, 70,000 isn't minor in my book. I could live for quite a number of years on that, thank you. It's good if more council housing can be provided, but it does need to be at affordable rents, otherwise you just end up in a vicious circle. If people aren't paying the rents, they get behind, get kicked out, come home homeless, etc. and things. So that's obviously an issue to look at. Particularly, I know NABCEL is a sort of arm's length from the thing, but it is actually funded, if I'm right, from the council, from us, the council. Because like the flats in Attleborough that I passed, they've still got loads of them that NABCEL bought that are still up for let, and they've been to let for quite a while. So I'm just concerned that, you know, we need, if we are getting more housing that belongs to the council and NABCEL, that it actually needs to be able to be actually utilised, properly, and are we getting the income from the expenditure? It's a shame that the government's not seeing all the issues that it's causing to councils. For example, this 53 year business, especially as many MPs, including our MP here, Marcus in Nuneaton, have been councillors or council leaders even. So it's a great pity that they're not, they're actually creating hassle for the council, unnecessarily. I mean, simple things that should be able to be resolved very, very easily, and it's just very frustrating to see that they're sort of putting obstacles in the way or making life more difficult for councils who are already struggling to try and balance the books. So I think that's it. Oh yeah, just one other thing before I finish. It's just a time scale. All these things, once again, not for calling. I know sometimes it can be obviously quite difficult and things, but surely, a year ahead and working backwards, it should have actually come to an earlier cabinet.
Thank you. Any points of clarification?
No, Chair.
Just one point, Michelle, before you go, Nicole. NABSAL actually falls under the general fund budget, not actually the item on the agenda today, but I do appreciate it's very difficult sometimes for people to fully appreciate the differences.
I haven't had as much time as I would have liked to read through all this.
I only point it out, just
okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any points on this from any member?
No,
I'd
Chair.
like to say this is an outstanding budget. It is a budget that I am really pleased to see on the table. It has been being worked on by Cabinet with officers for a great amount of time. We have a real desire to build the maximum number of new houses or acquisitions, whilst at the same time really investing in our existing stock, because our existing tenants equally deserve a real high quality standard of living. I think this is absolutely fantastic. I'd like to thank John as the Cabinet member for bringing this forward to us. There's so much on here that is really pleasing to see, including actually the graph at Appendix B, which I remember not too many years ago looking significantly different and dipping under the minimum working balance. So that is really very pleasing to see, and it shows that this council, led by this administration, is going to make sure that we have budgets moving forwards that are viable in the long term as well as the short term. We're not seeking short-term gain here, we're seeking long-term, the best interests of residents in Nuneaton and Bedworth. But there were a couple of questions, I think, and I know it's public consultation, but I think it's worth asking a question on, probably yourself, Dawn, the suggested increase in homeless hostel costs. That increase there, whether you could give us your view as an officer about why that is necessary.
Two reasons, really, Chair, and it's around bringing it somewhat in comparison with other hostels. So it's still below other local authority hostels and significantly below charges for bed and breakfast, particularly in the private sector. It is covered by housing benefits, so it's a fully recoverable cost. And it's also remembering that the cost at £35 actually also includes washing and cooking facilities and such. And when we have to place externally in bed and breakfast at £100 a night, those facilities aren't there, and then there's a shortfall often that families will have to make up. So for less than half of what is payable externally, there's a lot more facilities and a lot more secure facilities. And it also, the increase does actually help us to staff up and put in additional support where it's necessary for people in the hostels.
Excellent, thank you. And the minor variations, 70,000, I presume that's made up of a number of smaller items. It's at 3.2, Dawn, on the bottom of that table.
Yeah.
I'm presuming that's a combination of a lot of smaller items, but just really seeking clarification that that is the case and it isn't sort of 50,000 of something bigger. They're all going to be.
No, they are very much smaller amounts, and in total it's sort of 0.2% of the whole budget, really.
So it's very small. I hope that provides some reassurance to our speaker. Anything else on this?
No, just say thank you, Chair. Your previous portfolio holdings are clearly showing promise now. Sound investment, I think.
I
Thank
think
you.
very sound investment. And can I place on record my thanks to housing officers and indeed those finance officers who have assisted in bringing together what I think is going to receive, by the sounds of it, cross-party support, which is very encouraging to see. We obviously await when budget proposals will be presented to Council on Monday evening, but a big thank you to all of our staff who are working incredibly hard, and I would include those officers who are actually implementing the capital part of the programme. That is an enormous amount of work to get through, and I know Matt Byrne and his team in particular have been working incredibly hard on that. So thanks from Cabinet for everything that officers are doing in this regard. Do we agree the recommendations?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, they're unanimously agreed. Then move to item 8 on the agenda. This is the General Fund Budget and Capital Programme. This report presents the final General Fund Revenue Budget and Capital Programme for 2019-20 to Cabinet for approval. Section 3 of the report updates Cabinet on the forecast outturn for the General Fund for the current year, which is now a balanced position. There has been significant spend pressure from increased recycling contractor costs during the year, but this has been mitigated by increased income from various services, including green waste charging and vacancy savings. Section 4 sets out the background to the budget process and key messages from the local government finance settlement. 2019-20 will be the final year of the current 4-year settlement, and our revenue support grant has reduced to 0. The table at 4.13 sets out the total funding we are due to receive in 2019-20. Section 4.14 confirms the proposed council tax increase of 2.99% for 19-20, increasing the Band D charge by £6.78 to £233.66 per annum. Although many households, we should note in our borough, will pay less than this, as over 80% of properties are in bands A and B. Section 5 outlines the final revenue budget proposals for 19-20, and the table at 5.4 sets out the further savings that are required to ensure a balanced budget can be set. The capital programme for both current year and 19-20 is included at Section 6 and Appendix E. As part of the annual budget setting process, the Section 151 officer is required to review the level of reserves that the authority holds and confirm that they are a prudent level. The table at Section 7.3 summarises the reserves that the authority is expected to hold over the next 3 years, and Section 7.10 highlights the key points from the draft SIPFA Financial Resilience Index. Section 8 discusses the Council's medium-term financial position and considerable uncertainty that the Council faces over the next 12 months due to the spending review, the fair funding review. Sorry, I have to say this, I cannot believe the government is taking or prepared to take out the deprivation aspect of that. Defies all sense to me. And move to 75% business rate retention. This particular concern here is the confirmation from government that a full reset of business rates will take place from April 2020. Section 8.7 includes a graph from the Local Government Association showing estimated reductions in spendings after 1920. A risk assessment is included at Section 9, and the assurance statement from our Section 151 officer on reserves and budget proposals is at Section 6. This confirms that the estimates included in the 1920 budget are robust and the level of reserves are adequate. I'll leave it there for the time being. I do have speakers. Councillor Condon.
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank you and the Conservative Group for presenting budget ideas a week before the budget meeting. It is so much more healthy to actually have a few days to read the proposals and go through them, and I hope we can actually go further forward and actually have a bit of a merging of budgets at some point, because what happened at the County Council when we were under no overall control is that each group produced a budget and then there was some horse trading to actually get compromises. And I believe in anyone's budget there are good bits and bad bits, and there are parts of your budget that I'm very alarmed at and parts I like, and similarly with the Conservative budget. And in reality there is quite a difference in a lot of things where actually somewhere down the middle would be actually a safer and more sensible option. I particularly talk about garden waste. I went to the Warwickshire Waste Conference today. No one else from the Nuneaton and Bedworth in terms of councillors went, but it was very interesting. And one thing that's happening in 3 or 4 years' time is garden waste collections are going to be free. And there's going to be obviously a new waste strategy for England and Wales. And that has a massive, when you talk about having a sensible long-term budget for the future, actually making sure this budget going forward is proof by the, and suitable to change into the new waste strategy, that is really important. That is why I'm very alarmed at your £40 green waste charge. And I'm not actually that keen on the Conservatives cutting it all the way to £12.50 and instead cutting and burning all other stuff. We do need to actually have a balance. And as I keep saying, I think the collection cost is about £20 per household, and actually until we actually can get a free service again, I think we don't want to kill the service off by charging £40, but likewise we don't want to excessively hike the mobile home charges, and we definitely don't want to franchise out or whatever the waste collection service until we know what the government's waste strategy is. Because we had a great presentation from Daventry. They were in a right mess because they were in a contract with a collection doing all the stuff, and then all the strategies changed and things changed. So you do not want to change what you're doing with waste until you know what the government strategy is, because this is going to be a 10-year strategy. One thing I also want to pick up is housing numbers. We've lost new homes bonuses because we've got 100 more empty homes than we did a year ago. So we built about 500 homes, but about 100 more became empty. Obviously not the same ones we built, which actually means we get new homes bonus on 400 homes rather than 500. This is really important, because if we're not careful and if we don't employ our officers to get empty homes back into use, we're actually losing money by having this deduction from our new homes bonus. In the report it says you're expecting to build 624 homes next year. That's a lot more than I expect. Thank you.
You just finished on the buzzer then. That was well timed. Thank you. Any points of clarification?
No.
Thank you for your comments. Oh, sorry. Councillor Shepherd.
You've made comment that there was nobody from Nuneaton and Bedworth at the
No-
Waste Partnership.
No councillors from
Thank you for that
from
clarification. I actually had another appointment, but I'm pleased you've clarified.
Borough or
Because
county
I'm
councils.
aware officers went.
Okay. Thank you. Michelle Condon.
Thank you. I haven't had a lot of time to go through everything, so you won't get too many comments from me. You'll probably be pleased to know. On page 49, I noticed that there was 24,000 for a temporary grounds maintenance monitoring officer. I'm not averse to the fact that the grounds maintenance certainly needs more monitoring, or did, because we did have a lot of problems, as you're aware, in the last year. But last year there was a reduction in cost of grounds maintenance of about, I can't remember, off the top of my head I would say 40,000, but I could have had that figure completely wrong. And so it just seems sort of fairly ironic that, you know, they say, oh yeah, we can save this money and things, but in effect they couldn't actually save that money because then had to employ, you know, a temporary officer and things. So I know it is a guessing game to a certain extent, and you know it is difficult and things. But sometimes I do wonder if people have actually thought ahead, you know, enough when they say, oh yeah, we can manage with this. I'm glad to see you're not totally removing the grants to the voluntary sector. And you know, it was a tragedy and a travesty last year, removing the advice rights funding and things. It's a shame that some of that couldn't be restored because that has had to be absorbed into the CAB, and although they seemed to have have just about managed in the past year. I think it's obviously going to get harder and harder. On 6.4, sorry, I can't find it on my cabinet. I've written here something. Oh, what's the delay about the cemetery land at Oaston Road? Because it says additional land's been made available through the demolition, which we know about and things, but it says, the project's not been spent in 2018-19 and will be reprofiled into 1920, but are deferred until future years. So when are we actually going to see this? Because it now seems a long way off. So I'm a bit amused and concerned about that, because I don't think there was any sort of question that we were short of cemetery land and things, and yet it seems to be just sort of not happening. So I don't know who could clarify that, not necessarily here at this meeting, but things there. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any points of clarification?
No,
Thank you
Chair.
very much, Mrs. Condacott. I think members are well aware that actually an awful lot of this administration's budget was shared with council way back at, I think it was the October meeting of Cabinet. So a lot of things have already been in the public arena for quite some considerable time in regard to our budget. Are there any comments from members?
No, Chair, I think what you've said in the address earlier covers what we want to say at this present moment in time.
Absolutely. This, if the recommendations are agreed, this will now move forward to
Full
the
council.
budget setting meeting on Monday evening, when this, I'm sure, will be discussed and any amendments in depth. I'd just like to say that I think the budget before us this evening, and indeed alternative budgets that I have seen, show that austerity is far from over. Although the Prime Minister may think it is, local government is still being hit tremendously badly.
Yeah.
We have suffered tremendous cuts to our funding, and I think local government as a whole, including the chairman of the Local Government Association, Lord Porter, who is a Conservative councillor, are saying we are at a critical point and we need more funding from central government. We would all like to propose different things moving forward in our budget, but it is that constant cutting from central government and uncertainty about our ongoing funding that means we have to make some incredibly difficult decisions. And before I move to the recommendations, I am going to say a huge thanks to the finance team, who I know have worked very hard with all members of this council in coming to recommendations that they wish to propose. I know that they've often worked outside of normal office hours to ensure that all elected members have the information they need, and I am very grateful for that, and I'm sure the whole of Cabinet, I would hope the whole of Council would acknowledge that the financial management of this Council is exceptionally good. So I am going to move to the recommendations, and they are printed at section 2. Are we all happy with those?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And if our thanks can be passed on to your team, we would appreciate that. We do have some of them in the audience. A big thank you. It is well appreciated. I know I'm not the only one who probably asks all of those questions that we probably should know the answers to, but we ask them to seek clarification, and the service we receive is exemplary. So a big thank you for that. Moving on then to item 9, which is the Treasury Strategy and Budgetary Framework report. This report sets out the Council's strategy for borrowing and investing resources during 1920 and through to 21-22. All the Treasury and prudential indicators requiring approval are within the report, but are summarised at Appendix B. These help to ensure that our capital spend is affordable and prudent. The report includes forecasts for interest rate and future capital spend, and details the impact that these have on the borrowing and investments for this Council. The Council's investment policy, investment strategy, and our counterparty creditworthiness policy, it's a long word, which explains how we select suitable investment counterparties, are detailed in section 11 through to 13. The council is also required to have a policy approved annually for a minimum revenue provision for debt repayment, and this is included at Appendix A. As a result of SIPFA's updated Treasury and Prudential codes, all councils must now prepare a capital strategy describing a high-level overview of how our capital programme contributes to provision of services. This is set out at Appendix G of the report and will be updated annually. The recommendation is at 2.1 and it's for Cabinet to approve this strategy for 1919-20 as detailed at Appendix H and to submit the report to Council. Due to the timescales involved, this report is marked not for calling. And often, actually, many of the reports marked not for calling are subsequently going to Council. That isn't always the case, but it is often the case, particularly with financial matters. We do have a speaker on this, Councillor Condocker.
Thank you very much. As always, Craig does a marvellous job of trying to make the best of a really, really difficult situation. And with the possible exit from the EU in about 40-something days, it must be impossible to know where the country's going, interest rates going, etc. We spend an awful lot of money on capital projects as well, which also have to be funded through this. And the numbers in these documents start to look really scary as you see the borrowing go up, as we quite rightly try and build some housing and update stuff. So I didn't want to say a lot except to comment that if we want to be cautious and if we're critical of things about managing money, it is not because we don't believe our accountants are measuring it correctly. It's because we need a level of caution at this moment which is greater than we normally do, because obviously we can't predict what's happening in 4 weeks' time, 5 weeks' time. So I do hope we're careful, particularly over things that take up a lot of capital. It's quite right that we are borrowing to put money into NABSAL and rent stuff out, but we must actually have a speed lever on that so that it is not a burden on Craig, but actually something that Craig can actually flex, if you know what I mean, in terms of, yeah, we can borrow a bit more now or less. Particularly like my wife mentioned it earlier, we bought a lot of flats in Attleborough, the snooker hall development, which obviously then requires borrowing, and then we need to get rent in, and quite a few of them empty. So it's those sort of rather large projects we have to be particularly careful of when we do them, and also I suspect we overpaid for them because some were struggling, they've sold them to the council, and I don't think we got a very good discount, and I think the market for renting them out is difficult. So it's all those issues that all tie in, and if we do have a downturn in the next 8 weeks, we don't want to be in a position where we're just about having to give someone £2 million for some flats or whatever. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any points of clarification?
No.
Can I thank you for your comments? Any member?
No, good.
I want to refer to overpaying for the comment made about overpaying for assets. That is not my understanding at all, but I am going to ask Simone what measures we put in place when NABSAL does purchase property to make sure we are getting a good return on that investment.
Yeah, certainly. We have a business case in place that we have to make sure any conditions NABSAL meets, and that has been approved by the corporate asset management team. Any purchase that we're looking at is reviewed by our estates team and myself, if necessary, to make sure it meets those minimum yield criteria. And we do use our purchasing power as a local authority to get discounts where possible. We certainly have done with some of the acquisitions that we've made, like the Dawn side of the Pondwickers.
No, I'd just say particularly with Trinity Court on Attleborough Road, the issue I think initially was around the mixed use, and because it's a set of flats, that's why it was becoming difficult to sell on the open market, and we got a better deal for it because of that.
Okay, and I think I did refer to the expected income from actually our activities with NABSAL. Can you just clarify, Simone, what figure we are anticipating coming back to the council from our investments?
for the current year from NABSEL, including NABSEL gas as well as mental homes, we're looking in the region of 400k. I believe that's what we're on target to achieve for the current year.
Excellent, which is a huge buyback for the council and good credit, I think, to the team working on that, particularly the executive directors of NABSEL and their team. Any other comments?
No, Chair.
No? I'd like to thank again, and this is perhaps a bit of a theme today, but this is a very important budget setting process for our council. February is always one of those. We rely heavily, Craig, upon you and your team, and we do thank you for your advice, that professionalism, and indeed openness to work with the elected members. It's much appreciated. The recommendations are, they're usually always section 2 of the report, and I'm just looking back. Yeah, they are at section 2. Are we all happy to agree those?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, can I thank you very much? And I believe that brings us to the end of our agenda. Can I thank everybody for coming tonight? Lovely to see you, and can I thank everyone else for their attendance? Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Chair.
I'll conclude the meeting.